Ukraine's military says it has retaken a fourth village from Russian forces in the southeast. The gains reported over 2 days are the first in months and are part of Kyiv's new counteroffensive. The villages allegedly recaptured are in a cluster of settlements in Donetsk. That's a region partially occupied by Russia. Ukrainian troops released this video claiming to show their flag being hoisted at Blahodatne. Despite Kyiv's claim advancing a few kilometers, Russia's military continues to insist that it has successfully repelled Ukrainian attacks in the area. We can discuss this further with the former military intelligence officer Frank Ledwidge, who joins us now from Oxford in the UK. Frank, Ukraine claims to have retaken several villages in the eastern Donetsk region. Does this mean their counteroffensive got off to a successful start?
Well, good morning, Gerhard. I think what we can say two things. First of all, that much of what we know is through a glass darkly. But another thing we can say is that what we haven't seen yet is the commitment of main Ukrainian forces. There are 4 separate axes which they seem to be assaulting on, but all of them are not full-on assaults, partly because I think they've yet to reach in most places the first lines of Russian defences, the strong points that we saw being developed over the winter. But they are making good progress, better than, or at least as much as what might be expected. But we've not seen the main assault yet. We've not seen main force Ukrainian brigades yet committed.
Now, what do you think would be the likely next steps in this offensive? So
from west to east, if you like, from the Kakhovka reservoir, which is now being depleted, on the left, if you like, on the west, we've got a Tokmak axis. So you've got a force that seems to be driving towards the extremely important rail hub of Tokmak. Further to the right, we have the Blahodatne and Neskuchne in western Donetsk. That's on an axis towards Mariupol, actually. But I mean, we're looking way months ahead for that. We've got Bakhmut, and again, we've got the Kremnina, way up in the northeast Kremnina axis, which you may remember from last year being Severodonetsk. I'm thankful to say we don't know which of those will be the main thrust, the main axis. We can only speculate, but it may well be elsewhere. The Ukrainians are excellent at deception, and we can expect them to do that again.
Well, that's the Ukrainian side, but do the Russians, you think, have any aces up their sleeves that could foil the Ukrainian advance?
I've one reservation, and that's air power, but the Ukrainians are more than aware of that. They will be careful not to get ahead of their air defences so they can be exploited by drones and artillery and targeted that way. But that's one reason they're going to be moving quite slowly to make sure they've got that. But in terms of conventional military forces, no, the Russians have no aces up their sleeve. They've committed their main forces. They're extremely depleted in rather ramshackle leadership state at the strategic and operational level. And they are and will continue to be in trouble. The dog in the manger, though, other activities such as destruction of dams or assaults on civil infrastructure. But on a military front, no, they've played all their cards.
The military analyst, Frank Ledwidge there. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Ukraine's defense ministry says its troops have retaken control of a 5th village from Russian forces in the southeast. The gains reported over the past 2 days are part of Kyiv's new counteroffensive. The villages allegedly recaptured are in a cluster of settlements in Donetsk, a region partially occupied by Russia. Ukrainian troops released a video purportedly showing them posing with their flag in Storozheve. But Russia's military says it has repelled Ukraine's attempts to advance in the area. So for further analysis on the front line in Ukraine, and we're joined now by Domitilla Sagramoso, Senior Lecturer in Security and Development at King's College London. Thank you so much for joining us again on DW News. Ukraine here claiming to have retaken several villages in the eastern Donetsk region, but if you look at a map, you could argue it's a rather small advance. How significant would this be, do you think?
I think it's quite significant because it seems, at least at first sight, if we look at the direction that, Ukraine may have found a sort of a weaker point in the defensive lines of Russia, which was set up during the autumn and the winter of last year to sort of protect the areas that they had already sort of conquered and occupied. So I think that the possibility that there is a sort of an area where Ukraine could make a breakthrough, I think is quite important. Also, if we look at the direction of this advance, it is towards the areas further south of Berdyansk and Mariupol. So that, if Ukraine manages to penetrate further slowly, but surely, then it could, to a certain extent, ideally sort of break the famous land bridge, which Russia has built between the Donbass and Crimea through Zaporizhia and Kherson. So I think that we shouldn't be underestimating these advances. We know that Ukrainians are facing tough resistance, and we also know that they are operating without full control over the airspace, which is very challenging for them. So I think we should not underestimate these advances, although if we look at a map, they seem quite small. I think we need to understand that this is very challenging. There are a lot of very fierce battles taking place, and Russians have the possibility to counter potentially these attacks.
Yeah, Russia, for its part, is not acknowledging any advances and instead saying it has repelled the Ukrainian offenses. How credible do you think that claim is?
It's partly credible if we think more about the Zaporizhia front. So if we move further west and we look at the advances that were attempted to the south of Orikhiv, here the advances have been more difficult. There have been some small advances closer to the Dnieper River and in other areas further to the southeast, but the advances have not been so significant. Here, I think the resistance has been stronger. There was talk that Ukrainians had managed to overcome the first line of defense, but I think we still need to wait a few more sort of reports of evidence of that. So I think that, yes, the Russians have managed to counter some of these offenses, but at the same time, they have faced a very strong advance of the Ukrainians. So, we should take a lot of what the Russians are saying with a pinch of salt. But also we need to be cautious. It's clear that this offensive by the Ukrainians is not a kind of blitzkrieg where they advance, very fast, breaking the Russian lines. This is not really happening yet.
And just quickly, before I let you go, what do you think we're likely to see as the next steps of the Ukrainian counteroffensive?
I think it's difficult to know. I think what we can see is that they're trying to probe and find what areas there are weaknesses. And what is interesting, we haven't mentioned Bakhmut. This is an area where Ukrainians are advancing to the north and the south. They're sort of breaking the encirclement that the Russians had created around Bakhmut. So there are many areas where they are still, trying to see if they can advance further, and we see some successes there. I think what we can expect is this kind of advance taking place, further with Ukrainians trying to figure out which areas they see sort of weaker points where they can advance, with the hope that they can potentially create a sense of despair among certain Russian defensive positions and force the Russians to abandon these positions.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we should expect.
We really appreciate you coming on the show with your analysis. As always, that is Domitilla Sagramoso from King's College London. Many thanks.
Thank you.